Okay, there we go. All right, text number 1A. Baruch David Halei. Oh, he's not on. Sorry. Stephen Burke, go.
Let me just get rid of this little message. Okay. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly." So the bricks were to them for stones, and the clay was to them for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the entire earth."
Okay. Now, what is Hashem's response to this? Text 1B. Continue, Shalom.
Come, let us descend and confuse their language, so that one will not understand the language of his companion. And God scattered them from there upon the face of the entire earth, and they ceased building the city.
Okay. So it seems like this is what happened. Humanity was progressing. People figured out that they could build with bricks instead of just wood and stone. And that greatly expanded their ability for construction and architecture. They could now spread out to new settlements and build with greater ease and durability. So they aimed to use this innovation to ensure the endurance of humanity. But God has a problem with this project. And God decided that instead of a giant monument in order to establish forever their lasting endurance, the people would learn that they weren't really so impressive at all. So Hashem goes and changes all their languages and ruins their whole plan. But why was it so bad? What was God's problem over here? What did God find so offensive that these people try to do? They discovered bricks. They wanted to build a massive tower using their bricks, and God said, "Terrible idea. We have to break up this plan." Why? What's so bad about it? Instead of celebrating it, the Torah portrays it as a very negative thing. And one can deduce from here that the Torah is anti-science. Because as soon as the people demonstrated some scientific, technological capabilities, in those days it was the brick, what does God do? God comes right away and says, we have to ruin their plans. We're not going to allow them to use these capabilities to its fullest capacity. Now, if God is against science, I mean, you have to think to yourself, how would the world look today without running water, electricity, vaccines, medicines, and all of that stuff? So, could we actually say that the Torah is really insistent on limiting human advancement? Or is there a deeper story over here that we have to discover and uncover? And here, so we'll read the question. Why was the Tower of Babel a bad thing? They attempted to use their God-given abilities to do something uniquely human. What is wrong with that? So we're going to put this question on the side. We'll get back to it and address it later. And we're going to now move on to a Zohar. In Yiddish, they would say a shtickle Zohar, a little piece of Zohar. Now, one can say that this piece of Zohar is perhaps the most fascinating piece of Zohar that you'll come across. I mean, maybe there's others that you'll argue with me, but this is a prediction. This is a prediction that was written in the 2nd century by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We're talking here 1800 years ago. And it's a prediction of something that's going to happen in the future with a year given and what is going to take place. Let's read the Zohar, volume 1, page 116b. Rosalind, go ahead.
In the 600th year of the 6th millennium, the supernal gates of wisdom will be opened, and also the well springs of wisdom below. This will prepare the world for the seventh millennium. Like a person who prepares himself on Friday for Shabbos, as the sun begins to wane, so it will be here. This is alluded to in the verse, in the 600th year of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened.
Everyone understand what's going on over here?
Think so.
The Zohar is on this week's parsha. The verse says that in the 600th year of Noah's life, the flood started, and the description is all the fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were open. Says the Zohar, this doesn't only refer to Noah, but there's going to come a time in the 600th year of the sixth millennium, which is the year on the Jewish calendar 5,600. In that year, there's going to be a breakthrough. There's going to be a breakthrough that the well springs of wisdom of below will be open and the supernal gates of wisdom from above will be opened. All happening in the year 5,600, which at that time would have been 1,600 years in the future. The year 5600 in the Jewish calendar corresponds to the year 1839 and 1840 on the common calendar, the common era, the Gregorian calendar. Fascinating prediction. Now let's see what the Rebbe says about this prediction. Text number 3 from Lakutei Sichos. Jake.
Evidently, the Zohar is referring to the fact that the gates of wisdom in general, and the gates of the Torah's wisdom specifically, would open at that time. This did actually occur with regard to worldly wisdom. As for Torah wisdom, we merited in that era the revelation of Torah's inner dimension, a part of the Torah that had previously been hidden and concealed.
So the Rebbe says this actually took place. Well, let's see. The gates of wisdom, of the well springs of wisdom below. We'll start with that first. This is commonly associated with the Industrial Revolution. And let's take a look a little bit what happened over here. The battery is discovered in the year 1800, matches 1826, steam locomotive 1814, sewing machine 1830, mechanical calculator 1835, the glider 1854, traffic lights 1868, the motorcycle in 1885. In the 1800s, you see some fascinating revolutionary discoveries. And this is something that when you think about it, if you go back in time, let's say to the time that the Zohar was written, 1800 years ago, and you ask yourself between the year 1800 and 1500, in that 300-year span, how much did life change for the average person? What were the new discoveries in life that changed the way we do things, that changed the way humanity lived between the years of 1800 and 1500? Anyone know?
I'm guessing not much.
Huh?
I'm suggesting the printing press.
Maybe I'm not even sure the printing press existed then. I don't know. But one thing you'll name one thing. But that was so the way that they read was improved. They had an improved way of reading, maybe. But other than that, nothing else changed. Life was, and that's a span of 300 years. And you can expand that, go back 200 years before and 200 years later, and you're grabbing at straws. Of course, there were always advancements, but they were minimal. And all of a sudden, you come to the 1800s, and you see an explosion of advancement.
Yeah.
An explosion of knowledge and discovery. And it exists up until today. Every year they come out with a new iPhone. There's always something new, and wait, there's more. There's always new advancements and discoveries being shared with the rest of the world. So the Zohar predicted this 1800 years ago, that in this time, in the 1800s, there's going to be a gigantic a revelation of wisdom pouring out into the world, corresponding to the preparation of Shabbos. Just like Shabbos is the seventh day of the week, but we bring in Shabbos early. Already we advance Shabbos on Friday night, we bring in Shabbos early. So too, the era of great wisdom is going to be brought in early, beginning in the year 5600 on the Jewish calendar. At that time, now let's go to the well springs from above. What happened in that era as well? So we have in those years, the Tanya is printed 1796, Torah 1837, Likutei Torah 1848. What is the significance of these books, the book of Tanyatur and Likutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe? At this time, up until the Alter Rebbe, you had the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidus, and you had the Maggid of Mezrich, and they began slowly to teach the inner mystical teachings of Kabbalah and Chassidus to the world. But it was exclusive. The Baal Shem Tov came and made it open for all. But nevertheless, you can say something is open for all, but you have to be able to have the capacity to study it. You have to have the bearings to handle it. And not everybody was up for the task, because you had to be very refined character, very spiritual and holy. These teachings were nothing new. These teachings have been around forever. Torah didn't change, but a new dimension of Torah was revealed. It was discovered for all to enjoy. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chabad movement, began the shift of taking the deepest, most esoteric and mystical teachings of the Kabbalah and bringing them down to Chabad, to a space of intellect and understanding, where everything can and therefore should and therefore must be understood by the average person, the average Jew. And that began with the book of Tanya, which is general teachings. And then you have Torah Or and Likutei Torah, which is every parsha. You open up the weekly Torah portion. This week is Parshas Noach. Corresponding to that, there is a Hasidic parsha in the book of Torah Or and Likutei Torah. Corresponding to every single parsha of the week, there have teachings for that week's Torah portion. An unprecedented book given for all of the Jewish people to enjoy and to study. And since then, there's been this massive explosion of Torah knowledge, and primarily in the mystical teachings of Torah, shared with the world up until today, where you have constantly new books being written, explaining things better, using language that was previously unheard of to explain, to narrate, and to elucidate all of these deepest teachings of our Holy Torah. So this is, again, you give a look at the Zohar 1800 years ago. Well, imagine we go back in time now, 1800 years, and we read that piece of Zohar, and we say to ourselves, what already could he be talking about? Reb Shimon said that in 1500 years from now, 1600 years, there's going to be an explosion of wisdom. What do you think he could be talking about? That the horse is going to be able to walk with a little bit quicker, be able to schlep the wagon. Instead of using two horses, you'll have one horse to schlep the wagon. What could he be talking about already? What were their hasagas? What was their understanding of life? What was the luxury of the time? That wisdom, what are we going to be able to do? But we see fascinatingly how 1800 years later this prediction became true, and we're living in the moment as well. We're living in that era. We're living in the era of this great explosion of wisdom and knowledge, both from the scientific, human knowledge that's being shared, that's the well springs from below that were open, as well as the well springs from above, the teachings of Kabbalah and Chassidus. Yes, Shalom Herschel.
Two quick things. The portrait of the Alter Rebbe, Can we rely on that as accurate?
Yes.
And did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, besides this shtickle Zohar, did he say anything else around this subject? That
This part, while we're talking this prediction, you mean?
yeah,
I don't want to say no because I don't know everything that he said, but I'm unaware.
yeah,
To say no, yes, there's a big. That means you have to know everything.
yeah.
There was once a rabbi. There was once a rabbi that he went into yeshiva to be tested in the yeshiva. Someone quoted. They were trying to play with him, so someone quoted a Tosfos on the Gemara. He said, "There's a Tosfos that says such a thing," and he looked at them and he said, "There's no such Tosfos in the whole Shas, in the whole Talmud. There's no such Tosfos." And one of the guys sitting on that side looked, and he was so impressed because in order to say there's no such thing, you have to have confidence that you know everything.
Yeah.
Only if you know it all can you say it doesn't exist.
Uh-huh.
So he was so impressed with him that he took him as a teacher. He took him to be his mentor and guide because he saw that this guy is the real deal. He actually knows what's in every single Tosfos in the whole Gemara. So I don't know everything that Rabbi Shimon said on this subject, so I can't answer your question. But I don't have anything to share with you offhand now. So let's understand this now by way of a question. We see clearly that the Zohar connects the opening of the well springs of below and the opening of the well springs from above. They're both going to happen at the same time. Why? Why is that significant? What's the connection between these two? Seemingly, they're two opposite teachings. They're two opposite wisdoms. We understand the connection to Shabbos, that is going to be a spiritual awakening, is going to be a spiritual explosion. And before Shabbos, you bring in Shabbos early, so the energy of Shabbos can already be felt before Shabbos. Fine, I get it. But what's up with the science? How is that a preparation for Shabbos? How is that? The Zohar seems to be saying they're both together connected in a way of preparation. How is that? What is this preparation? So the question is, what's the connection? How is the advance above aligned with an advance below? Everyone understand up until this point?
Yes,
We're clear?
Yes, Rabbi.
So before we determine if the Torah is somehow anti-science, it's important to think for a moment what this actually means. Christianity, if you understand Christianity, and I don't claim to be an expert on Christianity, so if you know more than me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But the Christian belief system, which Western culture, our Western culture today is pretty much understood through Christian terms. Life as we know it in America today is pretty much looked at and viewed through the Christian lenses of hundreds of years. If you understand anything about the religion, you understand that the whole Christianity is all tied up in belief. If you believe in XYZ, then you're going to be saved and you're going to have all the blessings and grace, etc., etc., etc. If you don't believe, if you are a non-believer, well, then you're going to be doomed to the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. Fill in the blank. So it's all predicated on, and its central theme is belief. You must be a believer in order to be a Christian. You can't be a non-believing Christian. It doesn't work. It can't be such a thing. But Judaism is a little bit different than that. Judaism is all about practice. It's all about doing the mitzvahs. It's about doing the deeds. You can be a non-believer and still have a mezuzah on your door, and that's a mitzvah. You can still be a Jew even if you don't believe. Not to suggest that belief is not central to Judaism. It's one of the 13 principles of our faith. Of course it is. But if someone says, I don't believe, it doesn't diminish the fact that they're a Jew in any way, shape, or form. Judaism is very much centers around the performance of the 613 mitzvahs. We're an action-based religion, if you will. And this approach affects the way we look at science and academia. Many thought and understood that faith is somewhat separate from science, and they ruled out the possibility of having both faith and science together at the same time because it's all about belief. And since it's all about belief, the moment you say that I need to discover, I need to search and discover um, nature, this world, humanity, the sciences, you step away from faith. You step away from full, ultimate, and unwavering belief in fill in the blank. So they felt that it was the enemy. One was the enemy of the other. But Judaism, since by definition is about practice, and where do you perform the mitzvahs? Where are the mitzvahs done? Well, the mitzvahs have to be done down here in this mundane world, in the mundane reality. So then automatically the Jewish approach cannot reject science because practice is all about performance in this world. So we have to understand this world in order to perform and behave the right way in this world. If we observe natural phenomena, the world is a very important place. It's the home base where we need to operate. It's not a contradiction. Torah doesn't reject the observation and the understanding of our home turf, where the performance of Torah and mitzvahs needs to be done. On the contrary, we're pro-science. We're pro-discovery. We enjoy it and we like it. And if you give a look at our history, you'll know that some of our greatest rabbis, some of our most brilliant rabbis, were indeed most knowledgeable in different areas of science. You had Shmuel Hanagid, Maimonides, Nachmanides, the Ben Ezra, Barbanel, the Ramchal, the Vilna Gaon, the Alter Rebbe, our Rebbe, Yosef Ber Soloveitchik. These are just a few names that come to mind of people that were brilliant, brilliant Torah scholars, and brilliant in other secular studies and sciences as well. And we can actually take this a step further. And here is a little bit of a nuanced, deep, and brilliant teaching by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory. And he says like this: the Torah isn't only okay with science. The truth is that if you think about it, science and innovations would not be possible without Torah and Jewish belief. Can you imagine that? If you strip the world of the Jewish belief, if you strip the world of Judaism, you would never have science and innovation. How so? It's a big statement to make. How so? So he says, what was there before Avram Avinu? Before Avram, next week's parsha. What did the world believe in from Enosh up until Avram Avinu? Paganism. They all believed in multiple gods and they all had multiple powers, and each one was struggling and fighting one with the other. So everything in this world was dependent on which god was defeating which other god. And that's the way the whole belief system worked around worshiping the sun or the moon or trees or stones or stars, whatever they thought had some type of power in it that was able to some way change and alter the reality of nature and the world and life. So they would pray to these different gods and worship these different gods. Came along Avram Avinu and introduced to the world the concept of Hashem Echad, one God, one intelligent creator. So it follows from this that the world can be understood and developed by a singular theory and foundation of reason. only if you have one God who's the creator, an intelligent creator, can you then have science to go and try to figure out what this world is all about. But if you believe, as the pagans did, in multiple gods with all these different types of powers that were constantly changing and varying, so what are you going to understand? What are you going to discover exactly? What are you going to observe? You're going to observe the world as you see it in this split second. But that would never be able to tell you what happened the second before, what's going to happen a second later, because every second is depending on which power is in power, which God has in power today, what time of the day it is. Let's read it in his words, text number 5. Yossi.
The account of creation in the first chapter of Genesis is stunningly original, quite unlike any other in antiquity. There are no contending forces, no battles of the gods, no capricious spirits. God speaks and the universe comes into being. God is not in nature, but above it, transcending it and ordering it according to his word. Nature has no will or set of wills of its own. This was an immense intellectual leap. If God created the world, then it is, in principle, intelligible. The mists of irrationality have been dispelled.
So what Rabbi Sachs and others argue is that our gift of modern thought, monotheism, is really the gift to the world, because the search for a rational system behind the workings of the universe only makes sense if you believe that there is a unified theory stemming from a unified source. If you don't believe that there's a unified theory stemming from a unified source, there's a world of total chaos and constant change, then you can never attempt to discover any mathematical equation or any type of rhyme or reason for anything in this universe. So, based on this idea, that Judaism not only doesn't reject science, but based on his words, Judaism can actually serves as the mother of science, the mother of discovery, the ability, the notion that one can discover an intelligence behind and in creation. Many made the mistake and thought that you can replace science with intelligent design. But the truth of the matter is that science is not the place where you're going to find God. When a person realizes all of the wisdom, the perfection, the intelligence that goes into no further than your own human body. Today we know what the body is comprised of. Trillions of cells. And each cell has there's infinite wisdom in a healthy body. And for all of this to work in perfection when a child is born in a healthy way is something that is mind-blowing. And when you look into this, you can only come to the conclusion that there is a creator, an intelligent design, an intelligent God who put this all into play. It could not have happened by accident. We don't have greater appreciation. You won't come to a greater appreciation for God than when you just look at your own human body and begin to study it. And it's detail after detail after detail. Based on this, one can think that Judaism wants every person to become a scientist. What are we doing in the yeshivas, guys? Bounce out of the yeshiva and everyone should become a scientist, no? But we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Why are we not doing that? So there has to be a reason for it. Up until now, we understand how science is not the enemy of Torah. On the contrary, if you think science is the enemy of Torah, you're not understanding Torah and you're not understanding science. Torah and science are just two sides of the coin. Torah is the upper wisdom being shared, and science is from the other perspective. Both actually show and reveal Almighty God's presence in this world in their own way. So why are we not sitting in the universities studying, graduating? Why are we in the yeshiva studying Torah? So in the letter, the Rebbe lists ways that studying science is supported by Torah, and in some cases, scientific study is actually a mitzvah itself. But if you don't have certain conditions met, then science can take you to a very bad place. And specifically today, in the world of academia, the Western world of academia, and on the universities, not the subject, but the teachers teaching the subject have sprinkled their own non-belief into. They've injected it, and they give it over into the students, into the subject as it's being taught, and therefore it can be a very scary place for a believer to go. Not because of the subject, not because of the wisdom of the subject, but because the way the subject is being taught by certain individuals that have specific agendas. So let's read when study of science is actually permitted. Text 6. Shalom Hersh.
Science can be understood from within Torah study. An intelligent person can understand everything about a building by looking at a blueprint. And the Torah is the blueprint of the world. As described in the Talmud Brachos 8a, through his Torah study, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania was able to determine the duration of a snake's pregnancy. Likewise, as it states in the Midrash Tehillim 19, Shmuel and Rabbi Hoshaya were able to learn all about astronomy through their Torah study. There are cases where the Torah explicitly commands us to study secular topics. For example, the commandment to calculate the Jewish calendar. When a person is in a place where Torah study is forbidden, they are obligated to divert their mind to other kinds of wisdom, such as business. Secular study is permitted when one lacks the secular knowledge required to properly understand their Torah study or to perform a mitzvah, like Rav, who apprenticed with a shepherd for 18 months. This kind of secular research is not considered Torah study, nor is it considered a mitzvah, but it is considered a preparatory step that facilitates Torah and mitzvot. Academic proficiency to the degree necessary and no more for earning a livelihood, or one uses academics themselves as a profession. This is considered a necessary means for a permissible end.
So you have over here two ideas: science within Torah, and the Torah requires scientific knowledge. On the one hand, there are sections in Torah itself that teach you natural wisdom, natural sciences. There's wisdom within Torah, clear, explicit teachings about things that are not what you would call necessarily godly related matters. They're more earth related matters. So then, of course, part of a section of Torah. Then you have when it's necessary to study science in order to understand a section of Torah. So, for example, how the Jewish calendar works. If you want to understand the Jewish calendar, you're going to have to study a little astronomy. Not only a little, but advanced.
A lot.
Yeah, you're going to have to take an advanced course in astronomy, or you're going to be dumbfounded. When you open up Maimonides to the laws of Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the new moon, and you haven't taken advanced study in astronomy, we're going to be lost. We're simply going to be lost. We're going to be confused. So if you want to understand that section of Torah, you're going to have to study a little science. So of course, these are not only permitted, but this becomes a mitzvah. You have to, it's part of this study, it's preparation for the mitzvah, or it's the mitzvah itself because it's coming out of the books. Let's read a section of the tractate Shabbos in the Talmud, text 7a. Jake.
Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said in the name of Bari Kapara, anyone who knows how to calculate astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations and does not do so, the verse says about him in Isaiah 5:12, they do not take notice of the work of God and they do not see his handiwork. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, from where is it derived that there is a mitzvah incumbent upon a person to calculate astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations? As it was stated, Deuteronomy 4:6, and you shall guard and perform, for it is your wisdom and understanding the eyes of the nations. Which wisdom and understanding is there in the Torah that is in the eyes of the nations? You must conclude this is a calculation of astronomical seasons and the movement of constellations.
So the result of this is that in the middle of studying a section of Maimonides, you come across something that looks like this. Yossi, text 7b.
There is a difference of opinion among the sages of Israel concerning the length of a solar year. Some sages, the opinion of Shmuel, maintained that it is 365 days and 1/4 of a day, meaning 6 hours. Others, the opinion of Rav Ada, maintained that it is slightly less than that figure. There is also a difference of opinion among the wise men of Greece and Persia concerning this matter.
The wise men of Greece and Persia weren't Jews. That's not who he's referring. He's not referring to the Torah scholars. He's referring to the scientists of the day of Greece and Persia. In the book of Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, he's quoting from them and their disagreement. Now, the mitzvah of Torah study is upon every single Jew at all times. You're never exempt, really, from the study of Torah, from the mitzvah to study Torah, except in certain circumstances. Text 9. Bracha.
Rav said, I apprenticed with a shepherd for 18 months to be able to know which blemish is a permanent blemish and which is a temporary blemish.
Oh, my bad. I gave you the wrong text for that one. Let's go back one. 8a, 8b, and 8c.
It is forbidden to think words of Torah in the bathroom, bathhouse, or other unclean place, a place where excrement or urine is present.
So what do you do then?
Therefore, where Torah study is forbidden, one should make his business calculations so as to keep the mind occupied and avoid inappropriate thoughts. On Shabbat, when thinking about business is forbidden, one should think about nice buildings or artwork and other such matters that are allowed on Shabbat.
Okay, and then you have.
Do you think religious businessmen spend excessive time in the bathroom? Sorry.
No, because we learned.
Like that's when we recommend you think about business.
No. We already read before. We read before that for business matters, in order to earn a livelihood, it's permitted even to study the sciences to earn a livelihood. Certainly, doing the business tradings and dealings back and forth is certainly permitted as part of the regular order of a Jew's day, following the laws of Shulchan Aruch on how to do business. Now, says Rav, we read this already, that I apprenticed with a shepherd for 18 months to be able to know which blemish is a permanent blemish and which is a temporary blemish. What do we see from here? That Rav, if you open up a Gemara, Rav is from the greatest sages in the Gemara. The Gemara says Rav Tanhu Upalik. He was considered, even though he was an Amoira, he was considered to be on the level of a Tana, the first generation of Talmudic sages. One of the greatest of the great. Halacha always follows Rav when it comes to Isurin. And Rav says that sometimes you simply are not going to be able to understand what Torah is trying to teach you by only opening up a book of Torah. Rav himself, the great sage Rav, said, I wouldn't know what the laws of blemishes in animals were. That's why, were it not that I went to apprentice for 18 months. In other words, if I didn't go to, why did he go to apprentice for 18 months with the shepherd? Because he had to see for himself, what are these things? What are the different blemishes in animals? What renders an animal to have a blemish and therefore cannot be sacrificed? What renders an animal to have a blemish, therefore, is not considered to be kosher. You only know it through hands-on apprenticeship. You're not going to understand it. You could read it. We all know you could read a lot in life, but until you experience it, you're not going to know it. So then, of course, we come to the permission from Torah to study these different intelligent subjects, secular ideas, in order to then take that knowledge and bring it back to Torah to help me understand the Torah subject in a better fashion. So we have like this. We have number one, scientific study within Torah, right? When Torah itself teaches you something that isn't necessarily a Torah subject. Number two is scientific study mandated by Torah in order to understand, as we said, you're going to have to look out and study astronomy to understand the laws of Kiddush HaChodesh. Then you have scientific study when Torah isn't an option, in the bathroom, for example. Then you have number four, scientific study to understand Jewish law, like Rav went and took an apprenticeship. And finally, you have scientific study to earn a livelihood. If you need it to earn a living, for whatever reason, that's what your calling in life is, to earn a living. So then you have the permission to go out there and get that job that you need, following that course that you need to take, or the courses that you need to take, in order to teach you how to do that accounting, how to do that law, how to do that plumbing, how to do that painting, how to do that, you name, whatever it is, that acting school, whatever it is in life that you're doing, you're trying to do. If you need to take a course in that, not a Torah course, but it's to earn a living, then it's going to be permitted. Is this understood up until this point? Anyone have any questions up until this point? Do you have any comments to make? No. Okay. Everyone understand what this means? Anyone disagree with this quote over here?
On my screen, it's blocked by our images. What is it? To hijack the.
To hijack the brain is to hijack the entire person. The moment you have someone's brain is the moment you have them. And it's for this reason that Torah is so sensitive to other teachings besides Torah, because Torah recognizes the value, Torah recognizes the importance of the human brain. And this is different than what popular wisdom out there really is. We're never afraid. God isn't afraid. The rabbis weren't afraid that if you match up Torah and science, Torah is going to lose in the arm wrestle. Because if we're afraid, then that means you don't have the goods. You don't have the truth. That's not what it was about. Because science can never be a contradiction to Torah. Science is all about discovering Hashem's world, and Torah is the blueprint for Hashem's world. So they match. There's a perfect synthesis. There's a perfect blend. There's a perfect co-piloting between the two. But as I said earlier, it's possible to misunderstand something, and it's also possible to be taught something within the framework of secular studies with a flavoring that isn't scientific and a flavoring that isn't productive for religion. And if that gets injected and that gets mixed in, that can have a terrible effect on a person's brain. And that's where you lead to having many scientists becoming non-believers. Not because the subject teaches them to become a non-believer. Observing the world doesn't lead you to become an atheist. Discovering the depth of this universe isn't going to lead you to be a non-believer. On the contrary, if anything, it points you to the direction of that there was an intelligent designer, there was a creator, there is a God. but it can be hijacked, can be misused. And that's why we have a mitzvah in the Torah that goes like this. Mitzvah of tzitzis. What's the mitzvah of tzitzis? Why do we have the tzitzis? So you should see them, and you should not wander after your heart and after your eyes, which you are going astray. It's very easy to be led astray. We have a reminder. The mitzvah of tzitzis is there to remind us not to let us go astray. Getting intellectually involved in the beliefs and theology of non-Torah discipline can disrupt the intimate space between a Jew and God. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, text 11, Roslyn.
She may have left us.
She's right there.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Excuse me.
Intellectual contamination is greater than the contamination of idle speech, for speech only impacts the emotions. It does not, however, contaminate the intellectual facilities in a person's soul, for it is just words of foolishness and ignorance. Inasmuch as these are not intellectual matters, the intellect remains uninvolved and untainted. Not so in the case of various secular studies. Thereby a person impacts and contaminates his divine soul's intellectual facilities. Faculties. The exception is one who employs these secular disciplines as a useful instrument, as a means of earning a more affluent livelihood with which to be able to serve God, or unless he knows how to apply the secular disciplines in the service of God or to his better understanding of his Torah. This is the reason why Maimonides and Nachmanides of blessed memory and their peers engaged in such disciplines.
Excuse me. Okay. So we see from here, based on all of this, what the problem now with the original, we can answer that original question now. Who remembers our original question we had today?
Why Hashem seemed to punish those who were advancing in a technological way?
Excellent. What was wrong with the people that try to build a Tower of Babel? What did they do so wrong? They seem to be trying to use science and use their advancements to their advantage and their luxury and their life. But now we can answer the question. Now we can understand Torah's perspective on science and technology in general. Torah views secular studies similar to the way Torah views many other things in life. And that is what we would call in food language, in the kosher food language, we would call it parv. It's not milk, it's not meat, it's parv. Well, parv can be used either for milk or it can be used for meat. Torah views science the same way. The subject, the intelligence, the wisdom within there is parv. If you take it and you utilize it and you use that wisdom for the good, for a godly purpose, so then it becomes holy. But if you take the science advancements and you use it for an ungodly purpose, then it becomes unholy. A piece of good red meat. Some will argue, maybe some on this call, we have a lot of vegetarians on the call, so that's not a good example. A nice, good, organic, healthy fruit shake. Some will argue Well, that's a deep uh, physical pursuit of physical greatness and I don't know all the reasons why it doesn't belong in a nice refined Jewish body. A Jew doesn't belong interested in these things. A Jew belongs opening up a chum. You need a drink, drink water. You have no business going anywhere else. Some will argue it's anti-God. But Torah, the truth is, how does Torah view this? Torah views this fruit shake, parv. If you take the fruit shake and you use it for something kedusha or something holy, use the energy, you use your strength and your good health for the good, so then that became a holy thing. But if you go take it, drink it, and use your strength only to become stronger, so you can have larger abs, so that you can show off, so you can be more self-indulged and grow your own arrogance, so then it's a horrible thing. It's all about how you use it. Do you use it for a good purpose, or are you mistreating it and misusing it? God gave this world some fascinating, phenomenal features, the laws of nature, and God created it all for a purpose. If you take the study of the physical phenomenon and all the data and you use it for something that's good, kol hakavod, you just did the right thing. Torah gives you the stamp of kosher on it. But if not, so then you get the stamp of not kosher on it. So it's all about you, the one who's studying it, and how you're using it. The people of Bavel took the science, took the technology of the time, took the bricks, and they decided they want to build a tower. Nothing wrong with building a big tower. You can go build a big tower in the city. Why are you building a tower? Are you permitted to develop, to build a massive tower? Well, why are you building the tower? Then I'll tell you if it's permitted or not. If you're building the tower to earn a living, to make money, to do good, fine. If you're building a tower as the people of Bavel were building the tower, to prove to the world that we are going to live forever. God will never be able to destroy us. We'll build a tower so high, we'll fight God in the heavens. God thinks he's going to bring a flood, we'll outmaneuver his flood. God will never be able to come down and strike us as he just did with the flood. So what does God say then? It's not that the bricks were bad. God didn't say, all right, you guys misused bricks, we'll remove bricks from this universe. No, bricks are good if they're used to the right. God said, you guys are not going to be able to use these bricks anymore. So he made them all talk different languages. He broke up the project. The project was broken up. You want to take those same tools and use it for something good, go ahead by all means. So the problem with the people of Bavel is not the science that they were using. It was the way they were using it. And we understand that now very well. This helps us understand also. Let's read text number 12. Shalom Herschel.
This is what the people really wanted to do. They wanted to establish civilization on the moon where they would be spared from a future flood. They originally thought to get there by way of a vessel, but how would they lift that vessel and defy the law of gravity? So they thought of building a tower that would rise to a space so high where gravity doesn't rule. From there, they would be able to fly away with their vessel to the moon.
It's a fascinating idea that they came up with, what they tried to achieve. A great discovery they were trying to make, but all for the wrong purposes. Now we're talking a few thousand years later, and everybody here has been on a plane and we've flown up in the heavens. How are we permitted to fly in the heavens? If the people of Bava wanted to fly and God broke it all up, so why are we flying up there? Well, the answer is obvious, because we don't fly to the heavens in order to escape God. That's not the purpose of our travel. It's not the purpose of our flight. And we had a second question. Anyone remember the second question? On the Zohar? Remember the question we asked in the Zohar? Why does the Zohar mix the opening of the well springs from above and the opening of the well springs below at the same time as bringing in Shabbos early? Now we could understand that as well. Because the world, to properly use and benefit from modern science, it has to have the tools to incorporate the knowledge in a healthy and godly way. As the spiritual underpinnings of this universe were disseminated, and as God's role in creation became more and more understood in the sphere of Torah, the world became mature enough to begin a new era of scientific advancement as well. So first there was an opening of the well springs of Chassidus, and with that, the world now was capable of understanding and digesting properly in a mature way the new scientific advancements that would be discovered as well. Does this mean that every scientist in the 1800s became a believer? No. Many took their scientific discoveries in the wrong direction, and they perverted science, and they used science, and they said science is the replacement for God. But never, even though they did that, it doesn't take away from the fact that the stage was already set for science itself to become more in tune with the godly reality. And therefore, for the last couple of hundred years, there's been, says the Zohar, the Zohar predicted this. There's going to be an opening as Noah went into the ark in the 600th year of his life. There's going to be a massive flooding of knowledge, of spiritual knowledge. And since there will be that opening of spiritual knowledge, from the bottom up, there'll be an opening as well, reflecting that, because the world will now be able and capable of understanding it. Not everything we're capable of do we actually do, but at least now we have the tools and the ingredients to make it all work, and to make it all work in the correct way. So the takeaway from today, if you will, number one is, the mind is a very, very, very sacred place. And it's a very potent force that can influence one's behavior. And therefore, we have to make sure that we keep it a space for God. Keep the mind a space for God, even when you're going out to work. The things that we're engaging with that are not godly necessarily in nature in a revealed way, nevertheless, we should only engage with them if it's to further a good, noble, and godly cause. So if it's to earn a living, or if it's to understand something of Torah, then we should be engaging with it. And if it's not to earn a living, and if it's not to understand, so then why are we engaging? We have no business engaging with this, because it's only going to bring us to a place that a Jew doesn't belong. The problem with the Tower of Babel wasn't their scientific advances, it was their attitude of putting God out of the picture. And this is why the advances in the 19th century on both the material and spiritual planes are linked, because one is meant to complement the other. And as Rebbe always said, I'll conclude with this, there is no such thing as science that's in contradiction to the Torah. If we think that it is, we have to understand the science better, or we have to understand the Torah better. We're misunderstanding one of them, because they're both perfectly aligned wisdom of Hashem. Anyone have any questions or comments or furthering this discussion?
It's not a brief answer, and I know very capable people, including the Rebbe, have answered it. It seems the overriding confusion between Torah and science is when it comes to dating the earth and dating creation.
Yeah.
That seems to prevail no matter how many explanations are offered, no matter how
Yep.
many.
Yeah. Now, a rabbi just recently passed, Rabbi Tendler, who was the son-in-law of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. He he lectured on this subject, and he had a private audience with the Rebbe. The Rebbe discussed with him this, and he wasn't bothered by the scientific dating of the world, as it is a contradiction to Torah. But the Rebbe was adamant to him. The Rebbe felt that it's only thousands of years, and it's not what the science was saying. And the Rebbe argued with him from a scientific perspective how their dating ways and technologies are incorrect. And he said that every time he didn't agree with the Rebbe, but anytime he lectured on the subject, he would always mention the Rebbe's point of view, because it was definitely something that has to be reckoned with. If one wants to have a serious discussion about the dating of the Earth, you have to consider the Rebbe's point of view as well. So an honest scientist doesn't reject sound theories. On the contrary, an honest scientist further analyzes sound theories until they come to a final truth. And there's no such thing as a scientific fact. Do you know that?
Well, the whole scientific method is evolves. We measure better. We know more. We change accordingly.
It either is or it isn't. Science is only trying to help us understand how it is. What it is, how it is. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Hatzlacha Rabba. Thanks for joining us tonight. To be continued next week. Please, God.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're
Good night
welcome.
all around.
Good to see you,
Great.
Jake. Take care, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
night.
guys.